March 15th, Sunday night, and we are still talking about the gospel according to Spiritism. We are on chapter 14, Honor Your Father and Your Mother. So let's read what was written by Allan Kardec. He started out this chapter with verses, Matthew 19, chapter 19, verse 18 and 19. It's also in Mark and in Luke. He said unto him, Which commandments? Jesus said, Thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt commit no adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy father and thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And also, Allan Kardec quotes the Decalogue, Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So this commandment, honor your father and your mother, is very important. But first, I want to say we are here because of Spiritism, Allan Kardec, and the headwaters of Spiritism is the Spirits book. I recommend everyone to read that. And this video I will post to YouTube tonight. And please share this video to their Facebook page. Come and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell. Share it. Comment. Whatever you can to help the algorithms reach more people so they can learn about Spiritism and learn why they are on this earth. It's very important, especially in the time we have in our current culture. So again, you can get Allan Kardec's The Spirits book and also Allan Kardec's The Gospel According to Spiritism. You can find that on PDF. It doesn't cost you anything. Although on my website, nwspiritism.com, it'll take you to a bookstore. You can get one and get a copy of the Spirits book or any of Allan Kardec's work. But you can also get them on Amazon.com and I think Kindle. I think they also have them in Kindle too. So please read the Spirits book. It will be amazing. And then I would recommend the second book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. And then for those, I've had a lot of emails lately from people who really are interested in mediumship. I would highly recommend you read Allan Kardec's The Medium's book. That still probably is the most exhaustive research of all different types of mediumship, all types of spirits you may encounter, how to detect them, what to do, and it gives you examples. It's a great book. So let me carry on with what we were doing on honor your father and your mother. So this is what Allan Kardec says. The commandment, honor your father and your mother, is an inference from the general laws of charity and love towards one fellow beings, seeing that those who do not love their mother and father cannot then love their fellow creatures. But with regard to parents, here the word honor contains an extra obligation, which is filial devotion. God wishes to show us that respect, esteem, obedience, caring, submission, and deference should be joined to love. All these put together involve an obligation for each person to carry out what is demanded by charity with regard to one's neighbor, and which implies an even more rigorous duty towards parents. This duty naturally extends itself to those who take the place of a mother or father, and whose merit is much greater because their devotion has nothing of obligation. God will rigorously punish all violations of this commandment. To honor your mother and father consists not only not showing respect, but also helping them in their needs, offering them rest in their old age, and surrounding them with care, just as they themselves did for us during our infancy. Above all, it is necessary to demonstrate true filial devotion to destitute parents. Do you think this commandment is being kept by those who, believing they are doing a great deal of good, offer only the strictest necessities to their parents, so as to avoid them dying from hunger, while they deprive themselves of nothing? Or when, so as not to leave them unsheltered, they relegate them to the worst rooms in the house, while reserving the best and the most comfortable for themselves? The parents are even fortunate when this is not done with ill will, or when they are obliged to pay heavily for the rest of their lives by being forced to run the home. Is it then that the old and feeble parents must serve their children who are younger and stronger? Did their mother make them pay for milk they suckled? Did she count the sleepless nights when they were ill, or the steps she took in order to guarantee they lacked nothing? No, children do not owe their parents only the strictest necessities. They also owe them, according to their possibilities, all those little extras like thoughtfulness, loving care, which are nothing more than interest on which they themselves received, the payment of a sacred debt. This then is the only filial devotion which pleases God. Now, this is very important. So, it's, again, you can bring down Spiritism to the basic tenets, and that is do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And now, which is, this is what they said. If you want to break down, if you want to summarize Spiritism as much as possible, it's the golden rule. But with your parents is even go a little extra. Now, I do know that some people have terrible parents, and people have emailed me, and people have written that they've had the stories I've heard are horrible parents. Now, in the Spirits book, it did have a question about when the parents are horrible, and what the Spirits book did say is the parents who are horrible parents are always more primitive or more immature spirits. They are not mature spirits. Now, there must be many reasons, and I'm sure if anybody listening to this program saying, well, why should I honor my parents? They were horrible to me, which I hope is in the vast minority here that people listen to me, that is a good question. And sometimes, if the parents are so horrible, it may be better to distance yourself them, but always open up where you can reconcile with them if you can. I remember when I was growing up, I thought everyone had great parents like I did. Of course, when you're a kid, you just automatically assume everything's the same for you as everyone else, right? You kind of start learning things when you go over other people's house and stay the night or whatever. You kind of see a little bit wider world. But I remember even when I was in high school, I was talking to a friend about, how lucky I am with my parents. And then, this friend of mine said, well, I hate my parents. And it was just shocked me is that someone could do that. Now, there's a big difference probably when a person's a teenager and they hate their parents, and it could be for a selfish reason, right? It could be that their parents are certainly fine. They're just trying to give some sort of structure and discipline. That's, of course, usually a person will grow out of that and everything will be fine. But this person did say some things that were pretty bad of how their parents were. And it did shock me that, parents could be like that. But of course, as I grew up and, saw more of the world, I saw more and more of this, that there can be pretty bad parents. So now, why does that happen? There are so many reasons, but probably the basic reason is that somehow you have done something like they did to you in the past. Somehow you did not warrant having good parents, which is sad because we all know that in childhood is important for us to grow and to have good parents to help mold our character for the better. So when we're around 15 to 20 and our original character comes out from our past lives and our life in the spirit world, our spirit character, that we've modified it a bit and made it better, right? We've improved it. We've made it more civilized, less primitive, less dependent on the primitive emotions of hate, envy, and jealousy. So that is, that must have been a large wrong, or someone actually even asked for that, so they could, they could atone for something they did. So anyways, but if you have parents who you believe do not deserve to be honored, all I ask for you is to not do anything mean to them, because karma will take care of that. and then also try and reconcile if the opportunity arises. But of course, I believe the spirit world understands if it was so bad that, it may not happen, but try. And, if you can try, you're actually helping them. Hopefully, you're helping them become better people. So if they're parents, again, they will learn how to be a much better set of parents, a mother and father. So let me carry on with it, what Allan Kardec said. Alas, for those who forget what they owe to those who sustain them in the hour of weakness, who, with the giving of a physical life, also gave them moral life and many times imposed upon themselves great privations in order to guarantee the well being of their children. And yes, that's true. Parents sacrifice a lot. Well, unto all those who are ungrateful, for they shall be punished with ingratitude and abandonment. They will be hurt in their dearest affections, sometimes even in the present life. So there's also, if you're a bad child, maybe that's another reason why you may have bad parents. If you're a bad child and say, okay, you didn't care about your parents, even though your parents were good, we'll give you bad parents. You never know. The spirit world is very subtle, and they only do lessons for you that they think that will actually help you, right? There's never any punishment there, but they do things they think will help you in one way or the other. So we carry on. But certainly in the future one, wherein they will suffer themselves what they have made others suffer. It is true that some parents neglect their duty and are not all they should be to their children. However, it is only God who has the competence to judge and not the children. These are not competent to be able to judge because they have perhaps deserved their parents' behavior. If the law of charity demands that evil be paid with goodness, that we be indulgent with the imperfection of other, then we should not speak against our neighbor, that we forget and forgive all grievances, that we love even our enemies. How much greater must be our obligation when related to our parents. Therefore, children, so now Allan Kardec's talking about what I was talking about, bad parents, in matters relating to their parents, should take as a rule of conduct all those principles of Jesus concerning our fellow beings. They must be aware that all reprehensible behavior toward strangers is even more reprehensible when related to parents. Also, what might be only a small offense in the first case may be considered a serious crime in the second, because here the offense of lack of charity is joined to that of ingratitude. God said, honor your father and your mother, so you may live a long time in the land that the Lord your God shall give you. Why did he promise earthly life as a recompense and not heavenly life? The explanation lies in the words, that God shall give you, which, having been omitted in the modern formula of the Decalogues, has altered the meaning. But first, in order to be able to understand clearly, we must go back to the situation and ideas existing amongst the Hebrews at the time. They still knew nothing of a future life, as they were unable to see anything beyond the physical. They had then to be impressed more by what they saw than by what they could not see. So God spoke to them in a language well within their reach of understanding, and as one would expect to do with a child, put them in a perspective which could satisfy them. So what Allan Kardec is saying, there's a couple of things. First, is and what has been said in other spiritist literature is that when the spirit world talks to people on earth, they talk to them in a language they can understand. So it all depends on their culture, their technological progress, of what they can understand at the time. And that's why, of course, the Old Testament was so directive. You do this or you're going to be punished. Whereas the New Testament is a little bit more advanced, is more consultative, right? Okay, I think you should do this. And then, of course, the third revelation, Spiritism, is even more just information put forward to you so that you can figure out how you process it and what you do with it. Spiritism is very unique in that way. There is absolutely no negativity exposed, saying that, oh, if you don't do this, you're going to be, damned, or or this is going to happen to you. Or if you don't wear this, or if you eat that, something's bad going to happen to you. No, it's actually worse. It's Spiritism is actually worse because it's all up to you, right? Whereas most religions and doctrines in the world right now give you a very, defined guide rails. Okay, this is what you have to do. You got to come, and if you're Catholic, you got to come to church every Sunday and take communion, or we might excommunicate you, right? Because I've known people that hadn't gone to church for a while, and they get this letter saying, "Are you going to be excommunicated?" And other religions, like if you eat that or you don't wear this. Whereas in Spiritism, it's you do whatever you want, but every time you violate your own conscience, that karma will come into play and you're going to feel bad about it. It's funny when you're a spiritist, I think back and I think, oh, why did I do that? I wish I could rectify that. And I think about my mother, right? We had my mother living with us, and I thought, oh, why didn't I take care of her better? And my wife and I talk about that. We should have done better. We took care of her, but there's still things that like we would get upset, and being a spiritist is like your conscience is even more of an enforcer than before. So it's pretty, it's interesting. Is once you really understand spiritism, then you understand what you've done wrong or what you could have done better. But like the spirit Joanna de Angela says, is when you think you've done something wrong, don't stress over it, and most importantly, don't punish yourself for it. All you do when you punish yourself for things is then you think you've been forgiven, and it sets up your mind. If you give yourself physical pain or something else, it instills a bad habit. No, analyze what you did wrong, try to do better next time. And she says, take that wrong and take it like an arrow out of the quiver, and you shoot the arrow out in the woods, and you never see the arrow again. And I always try to remember that. So that's important. Now, what's interesting, of course, Allan Kardec always has so many good things. So now let's go. The next thing he says is, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And this to me was very interesting. This is Mark chapter 3, verse 20 to 21 and 31 to 35. And this comes up with, again, a very important part of Spiritism. And this is really one of the hardest. Let me read the New Testament version in Mark. And the multitude cometh together again, so they could not so much as eat bread. And when his friends heard of it, they went out to lay hold on him, for they said, he is beside himself. There came then his brethren and his mother, and standing without, sent unto him, calling him. And the multitude sat about him, and they said unto him, behold, thy mother and thy brother without seek for thee. And he answered them, saying, who is my mother or my brethren? And he looked around about on them and which sat about him, and said, behold, my mother and my brethren. For whoever shall do the will of God, the same is my brother and my sister and my mother. Now, Allan Kardec writes that some of the words used by Jesus appear to be quite extraordinary when compared with his goodness, kindness, and unalterable benevolence. Those who are incredulous never cease to find an argument in this fact, alleging that he contradicted himself. However, it is undeniable that his doctrine has at its basic principles its very foundation stone, the laws of charity and love. Well, then, is it possible that he would destroy on the one side what he had built on the other? Therefore, we arrive at the following precise conclusion, that if certain propositions made by Jesus are in contradiction to this basic principle, then the words attributed to him have either been wrongly reproduced, wrongly understood, or they were never pronounced by him at all. Understandably, it causes great amazement that in this passage showed so much indifference toward his relatives, in a way repudiated even his mother. With regard to his brothers, we know they did not greatly esteem him, being spirits of little evolution. They did not understand his mission. They thought him to be eccentric in his ways, and teaching did not even touch him, to the extent that not one of them became his disciples. It was said that they shared, at least to a point, the same preconception as his enemies. In short, it is known the fact that whenever he appeared in the family, he was received more as a stranger than a brother. John tells us quite clearly they did not believe in him. Concerning his mother, no one dare deny the tenderness and affection he devoted to her. However, it is equally our obligation to agree that she did not fully understand her son's mission, since it was noticed she never followed his teaching, nor did she testify for him as John the Baptist. Her predominating feature was maternal solicitude. Nevertheless, to suppose that he denied his mother is not known to his character. Such an idea would have been found refuge in someone who said, "Honor thy mother and thy father." Then it is necessary to find another meaning to his words, which were almost always enveloped in a mist of allegoric form. Never losing an opportunity to teach, he therefore takes advantage of the moment and the arrival of his family to clearly show the difference which exists between bodily and spiritual kinship. So, and I'll go on with my own ideas on this, which I'm just going to kind of, instead of reading from Allan Kardec. So, in spirit form, let's go all the way back. So, first, Jesus says, "Honor thy mother, thy father." He also said, "Is everyone's my brother," right? Everyone is important to me. That's kind of what he meant. I remember I was going back and forth in a chat with this woman who I was helping her with, taking care of knowing why one of her young boy died at an early age, and she had dreams that she met him as a teenager, like during the dream, and then even her mother had a dream, and her father had a dream about him, and she was, very honored. I told her she was very honored by the spirit world to show that this boy most probably had to have this short lifespan on Earth to repair something that happened in his perispirit, because you see that a lot in the books by Chico Xavier and other Spiritist authors, but mostly by Chico Xavier in the Henri Louis series, where a spirit must come back because either they might have damaged their perispirit by suicide or some other type of thing, where they have to repair that physical mold that creates a physical body, right? And in order to do that, they must come back as a child, even just for a short time. And then many times that same child, that same spirit soul will come back as the next child. And that's what I told her. And I said, you just have to love and know that that's going to happen. And because the spirit is saying, look, this was planned. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. And then she goes, well, I love, and then we were talking about, you just need to love everyone. And then she said, well, I love my family, my mother, my father. I said, yes, but you need to then, take that another factor and try to love everyone around you. And that's really what Jesus is saying is try to love everyone as you love your mother and your father and your family. Now that completely goes, against most of our cultures, right? Is your mother and your father, your close family, then your extended family, right? Your cousins, right? And then maybe your city, your nation, whatever comes out. But so that's why it's important. And of course, you don't have to love them as emotionally love them as much as you like, but you need to try and look at them as spirits, and look at them as spirits in training, just like you are, and wish them the best, right? And that's what Jesus was saying. Now, that's in the physical world. Now, if you look at our lives as spirits, because we are immortal spirits, where do we spend the most time? We spend the most time in the spirit world. Do we have a mother and father? Did we, as a spirit, did a mother and father spirit, did they create us? No, they did not create us. We were not created from parents. We were created by the processes in the spirit world from more primitive logical constructs in which we marched up, from probably pretty simple, algorithms or whatever you want to call it, subroutines, logical constructs, to more and more sophisticated until we were deemed to be awarded our free will, because that's like the top prize that I can figure out so far from what I've read. That's the top prize in the spirit world, is once you're given free will, then you're going to be on this path to improve, hopefully for, all eternity. And you call it higher and higher, become a pure spirit, and do more and more work within the universes, and really help create and guide planets and whole cultures, everything. So when you're a spirit, you say, oh, I really love my mom and dad, but you don't really have a mom and dad. Now, you have a mother and father who were your physical mother and father. You may have had several parents, although, of course, as I said before, families tend to reincarnate together. So they may have the same child, although it changes over the course of thousands of years. And families may even have extra children that were, could have been rivals or something like that. In fact, there was a great lecture by Geraldino about Emmanuel and the family that was in 50 years after, where this woman and her maid, really plotted against a man and his wife, and I'm going to make this story short, and tried to break up their marriage, right? Did everything they could to break up their marriage. And then years later in the 20th century, guess what happened? The man and the woman were still married, and they had their regular kids, but they also had this woman who loved the man because wanted to break the marriage, and the maid. They were both children of that couple. So they, instead of plotting against them and being against them, they learned to love them as parents. So of course, that woman who tried to get the man, she had different physical parents also. So you have different physical parents. So think of that. You can love your mother and your father, and if you look at them as your physical self, you can say, God, I was so lucky. And I think of this myself. I was so lucky to have my mother and father because they were great. They both have passed away, but and I love them with all my heart, and they'll always be special to me. But I may have had other parents, right, in my past lives who are also special to me. And when I'm in the spirit world, I will meet and greet them and love them with all my heart. But are they so much more important than other spirits? Right now I feel they probably would be, but over the eons and having other parents, it would get more of a regular bond of love, right? Because we all are supposed to love each other in the spirit world. Now let's turn that around. Let's say you have not very good parents. You have horrible parents. So you had these horrible parents for a reason, and your parents are horrible for a reason. And that reason, God and Jesus knows. We don't really probably understand the full extent of why everything was done, but we do have to have faith in the fact that it happened for a reason. It happened for a good reason, and the reason's always some sort of edification, right? It's always to educate us for something. So if you look at bad parents, like you look at what you would consider bad actors in your life that gave you troubles or problems, and I've said this before, if you look at them as actors in a play that played a part that needed to be done in order to stimulate the central character in the play, which is yourself, in order to stimulate that central character to do or not do, or to grow into certain ways to modify their personality or character, which to you may seem negative at this moment, but really may really be positive in part of the way that the spirit world works. Is, remember when I've said the way that is, they don't grow people in straight lines up, it spirals. So you may have to be broken down a bit in order to recreate part of your character, the foundation of your personality. That may be part of it. And it may be what you see as a destruction of your happiness will then create a much more beautiful happiness in the future. I think the main thing is to know that no one is tortured because the spirit world gets pleasure from that. No, it's always, there's a good reason. Although I don't blame anyone in this earth to go, I can't think of what the reason is, and I hate that's happening to me right now. I mean, I can't blame anyone for saying that, and I've been there myself. Although since I've been a spiritist, I try and not take things personally now. When things happen to me, I'm like, oh, what did I do now? Like, my wife and I, we kind of laugh at it, like when someone steals something of ours, something like that. Go, well, we must have owed that person something, right? So it does help. I think understanding the Spiritist doctrine gives you kind of a sense of humor and a perspective when these things happen. And therefore, if you have parents that you don't like, as I said before, just be open to how to help them. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No one's going to blame you for that. So let's carry on with what Allan Kardec says, because he always says interesting things. This is what he says. The real family ties are not those of blood, then. Here he's talking about life in the spirit world, but those of mutual sympathy and the communion of ideas which hold spirits together before, during, and after their incarnations. From this, it follows that two people born of different parents may be more like brothers or sisters than if they were of the same blood. They can attract each other, search for each other, and feel happy together, whereas two blood brothers may be repelled by each other, as frequently seen. The moral problem is one that only Spiritism can resolve through the explanation of the plurality of existences. So there are two kinds of families: families through spiritual ties and family through bodily ties. In the first case, these ties are durable and strengthened with purification, perpetuating in the spirit worlds by means of the various migrations of the soul. In the second case, the ties are as fragile as the physical body itself. So again, this is a very good revelation. In my case, I believe that we must have had spiritual ties because my mother and father, they knew how to handle me, and it was perfect, right? It was great. Now, I've known others where there's always war, right? There's always difficulty, or maybe the mother and the daughter have problems, or the son and the father, or vice versa. So those are, when those happens, it's probably more bodily ties. But again, remember, the spirit world doesn't like unresolved conflicts. And if there's an unresolved conflict, guess what? You get to be born in the same family, because the spirit world wants everything resolved. They don't want spirits obsessing over other spirits because of some wrong they think happened. This is why Jesus said, forgive 70 times 70, because he knew when he said that is when you do something wrong, or someone does something wrong to you, and you really feel strong about it, and you can't let that go. You're going to try to hurt that person. The person's going to try to hurt you through life after life. And of course, if you thought you were the victim and you're thinking you're getting justice, you're actually hurting yourself more than the other person, because the other person that you are obsessing or doing something wrong to is probably getting the lesson they deserve. But for you, all you're doing is parking. You're not advancing. You're not learning anything. You're actually hurting yourself more. So again, this is why families are they're really the most important construct. And you see this over and over again. Families are it's the atom of the molecule of society, right? All the conflicts and everything happens within the family. And some people are lucky to have very peaceful families, and some people are not. So it's all about what you're learning is going on. So I'll carry on with what Allan Kardec This was what Jesus was trying to make comprehensible when he said to his disciples, "Here is my mother and my brother by spiritual ties, because all those who do the bidding of my Father who is in heaven are my brothers, my sisters, and my mother." So the hostility felt by his blood brothers is clearly expressed in this narrative from St. Mark, when he says they had intentions on laying their hands on Jesus under the pretext that he had lost his spirit or gone out of his mind. On being informed of their arrival, knowing full well the sentiments they harbored against him, it was only natural for Jesus, speaking in spiritual terms, to refer to his disciples as his brothers and sisters, although his mother was accompanying his brothers. Jesus generalized the teaching, which in no way implies he intended to declare that his mother, according to the physical body, was nothing to him in spirit, nor that she deserved only indifference, as he proved on many occasions. So Jesus was always trying to teach a lesson. And what a genius he was on while he was in physical earth. And of course, he still is our governor of the planet. And I do go into this of what Jesus is, which is so different than what people think. And I go into this in my book, Heaven and Below, talking about what Jesus, he is the governor of the planet, how he shows himself to people. He's like the CEO, he's the planner, he gets troops together, he helps projects. There was this one scene I talk about in my book, Heaven and Below, where all these people, these spirits, I think it was like in the 10th level of heaven, pretty high level of heaven. Of course, when I say 10th level, all this is just the way that the spirits said they would use in the book as they talked to the Reverend G. Owen. And there's other people who express other ways of levels. But these people were on this plane, and some high spirits came down and said, "Look, you guys get into groups, decide what you need to improve in order to help your task that you have been given, right, to help the earth move forward. And then Jesus will come and he'll help each one of you." So they said, okay, they all got into groups of 4 or 5, and they were discussing each other, said, "Well, I need this attribute to help me, and I need to figure this out to help me." And the spirit said he saw Jesus come, and he looked like this huge figure. And then he saw Jesus almost like, and he couldn't explain very. He said, "Look, I can't explain it very well, but it's almost like he replicated himself as they went around the groups." And then they found that each person was given that key they needed to help them carry on their tasks that they were assigned. That is one of the powers of Jesus. There's another vision in the chapter where they were in this huge temple, this church-like building, and Jesus was coming down, and he was going by each person, and he gave each person a flower. And the spirit said, when you touch the flower that Jesus had in his other hand, he says, you felt like this connection that Jesus knew you and only you, and you were special in his eyes. And yet then something, some light turned on, that's something you had been thinking of in your soul. Interestingly enough, the spirit also said, he goes, "Now, why did he give a flower that you could touch, but you can't touch him?" And he says, we couldn't touch him, because if I touched him, I probably would have been, exploded, because there's so much energy in Jesus that I could not physically have touched him. The very interesting things about Jesus is told by the Reverend G. Owen, and it's very enlightening. And in fact, in one of the spirits talked to Reverend G. Owen about the future of religion, and they said one of the things that Spiritism will have to bring to religion, especially like for the Catholic and evangelicals, is their idea of Jesus. And he goes, they have the wrong idea of Jesus. Not, and of course it's a good, right? Jesus is loving and this very humble person, but they don't understand the true immensity and complexity and the managerial executive prowess of Jesus as a pure spirit. He is so much more than this, humble carpenter and this most lovely guy ever who could put up with, all this chaos during the time of antiquity, during the height of the Roman Empire and the backwaters of Israel. So it's when you understand that Jesus is a spirit who started out like us, right? Started out not too bright like me, and yet through the eons he became perfected. So there's hope for all of us. So I think I've exhausted that statement on honor your father and your mother. So I do want to go here. I do want to go and kind of in the same vein is talk about a communication that was given. People shared that. Let me find it. Here we go. It's about the pandemic, the coronavirus that we're going through right now. I'm talking about this as March 15th, 2020. So I don't like to talk about, present day subjects because I don't want to age these videos, but I think this is important. And it's also, if anything else happens, any other pandemic or catastrophes, to show you the kind of communications and what they're saying to us during times like this. And this communication is pretty general, it's specific to here, but it can be used with general ideas of what this spirit, Liel, is telling us. Now, this was shared too within a group of people in the Spiritism Center, Sierra Fraterna, in Rio de Janeiro. It was first written by the Spirit Liel. It was written in Portuguese. I translated it, changed, used Google Translator because I can't translate very well myself, but I use Google Translator, and then I kind of repair it a little bit. So if someone ever sees it in its original Portuguese, you can tell me that I didn't know what I was doing. But let me show it to you right here, and let me read it to you. Wrong way. There we go. So this is from the Spirit Liel, and this is about what is happening right now. And again, this almost has with the same idea of Spiritism, that we should not be worried, we should love each other. So let me read this for you, for those who are on when I do my podcast, because I always upload not only just to YouTube but to podcast too. Okay, I'll start by the Spirit Liel. Friends, the disease that scares us is just a tool of the conscience for the readjustment of being. Now, what is it? What do they mean by that? A tool of the conscience for the readjustment of being. Well, again, as I've said before, this is a stimuli for us to think about what is and what isn't important. I'll carry on the quote. In this way, any fear of the dark pictures of the moment in which we live must be replaced by the certainty of divine protection and by the understanding that the disease is collective proof for improving the relationship of humanity with the real values of life. Too much materialism, the cult of ego and money, are the face of those who at this moment panic, not with the loss of lives, but with the possibility of the economic and financial collapse. How true that is, right? Where do we see the panic is? Oh my God, the price of oil went down at the same time, and people are going to be laid off, and that's important, right? I'm not, and I don't think the Spirit Liel is minimizing this too, but they're trying to put this in place, right? This is why you're saying is the readjustment of being. What is the importance between spiritualism and materialism? And he said, too much materialism. You still, so may carry on. Also interesting, Liel says this, after he says the possibility of economic financial collapse. That will not come because it is not in the interest of the greater world to abruptly change human relations. So I believe what the Spirit Liel says, we're not going to have this huge depression, financial depression, but we will, we'll probably have, I'm sure, some sort of economic consequences, but it's not going to be the financial apocalypse like some people are saying. I'll carry on in the quote. But rather the awakening of consciousness towards new forms of work and production, which is happening, right? People working from home, etc. I'll carry on. Fear is a reflection of the materialistic and greedy minds that have become ill. Do not fear outbreaks or disease. Seek firstly vigilance and understanding over the means of contagion, and remember the serenity within yourself that soothes and sustains. Do your part with tranquility and trust in the highest that does not neglect the ways of man, even if man does not perceive his action. Jesus is ahead of the world, and everything in his enlightened and merciful, and everything is in his enlightened and merciful hands. Watch and pray, Liel. So this is why it's really good to be a part of a Spiritist center, because then you hear these things. Many Spiritist centers will have a group of mediums, and they'll get messages. I've been in mediums meeting where they'll get messages from spirits, and of course my wife and I've been in mediums meeting. I'm not a medium, but I sit against the wall. They're at the table, and then someone will start writing something, and after the medium's over, they'll say, "Okay, here's the message for for whoever," and you'll get these things, and then they'll share them around. And this is very interesting because Liel is telling us, look, don't fear outbreaks or disease, right? Because Jesus remains ahead of the world, and everything is in his enlightened and merciful hands, saying that all this is planned out. That if there's a disease, now they're saying is don't just sit back and say, okay, yeah, come on, bring it on. I'll shake hands with everybody. No, they're saying act calmly and vigilant, do your best, and, don't try and spread it to other people. But remember, if you were destined to expire from this, something will happen and you will expire from this. If you're not, you will live through it. That may be painful, it may be a bother. You may lose money because you're ill and you don't get sick leave. All these things may happen, but it was all part of the plan. And again, what they're saying that these things, like these diseases that stretch through, they know they're there, and they serve a purpose. What the purpose is for each person, it could be different, but one should be, as they said, is try to be serene and calm and know that this is all part of a long process for you as an individual, because you're improving, and a long process for the earth, right? Because the earth was first a primitive planet, then it was a planet of atonement. And where are we going next? We're going as a planet of regeneration. And as we go to a planet of regeneration, more and more people, as it was said in the Spirits book, in order to become a planet of regeneration, over 50% of the people must have this increased spiritual maturity. And I know, not for certain, but I'm pretty certain we're not close to 50% yet. And therefore, as a collective humanity, we're still going to have stimuli that will cause people to, as they say, readjustment of their being. It's just a tool of the conscience for readjustment of the being, for rethinking your life, rethinking what is important, right? It's not going out and get toilet paper from your store. It may be thinking that your family, your mother and your father, who are old and more at risk, that they're okay. So these are things that what we must think about. And of course, and Liel's, again, he says, too much materialism, the cult of ego and money are the face of those who at this moment panic. So this is why you read these things, and like every sentence you can read something into it. I mean, the spirit world doesn't write fluffy letters that you can, as some authors I've read, and some papers I've read that were, you can go on and on with, that doesn't really mean much. That's why I reread so many books in the spiritist books. I always learn something. Like, I still, on our God at Home meeting, when we go over a spiritist book, I still see things, and there's in a different light. In the Gospel of Spiritism, you read that and you see things in a different light. Another book I read, which I love reading, is Memoirs of Suicide. What a brilliant book. I wish they would translate more of the Yvonne Pierre's book into English, but Memoirs of Suicide, just a brilliant book. I read that and I learn something new all the time. So there's so much to learn. But so if this is of interest to you, I would recommend also, looking at this more, reading the Spirits book. I also have a book that may help people, and that is The 7 Tenets of Spiritism, which I believe that is my own personal journey to Spiritism. And I talk about how I found it, how I found the signs and signals of Spiritism, and what the 7 tenets are, and how they actually impact your daily life. And that is also on Kindle and paperback and audiobook. So I believe that may help someone understand my growth through Spiritism, and how I found it, and then how I live it, by understanding that God is all around us, that we reincarnate in family groups, that we have predestined lives, that we are immortal spirits, and that we are loved all the time by Jesus and God, which is, the love is always there. That's probably, as the Spirit Lael said, that's one of the most things to remember, that we are, Jesus is always ahead of us. He's always one step, if not a mile ahead of us. He knows what's going to happen. So I want to thank everyone for our wonderful meeting tonight. Again, I will post this to YouTube and BitChute and BitTube, and hopefully that people can subscribe to the channel and share this. God bless everyone. God bless.